folks, it's your boy again, back in the building. Dr. Sean Thomas here, episode 50 of the Be More Today show. We're back in the building, and 50 is a big number, folks. It is 50 episodes we've done for this show since the beginning of last year, and I'm excited. The Be More Today movement is continuing to grow and continuing to move forward with all-star guests who are ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And the whole purpose of this movement is to recognize that we can do great things. I don't care who you are, what you do, where you've been, your history, your past, whatever. You can be great and you can influence the world in various ways. And that's the whole point of Be More Today. From the beginning with my book and our music on Amazon and our workouts, it's all about making sure you're inspired to keep pushing forward to be the best version of you. And we are now heard in 32 countries, and it's been awesome seeing the progression of this show and of this movement Be More Today. So for all those who've been out there supporting us in various ways, either on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or liking stuff, whatever, I appreciate you. I salute you. Thank you so much for your love and support. It really means a lot. And we will continue to push forward, continue to put out good content for you, and continue to keep this movement going. I think it's great for us to do great things in this time period, for this time period for our lives. So the quotation for today is very simple as always, and it's from Malcolm X. And he said, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today." And my guest on the show today embodies that. He's someone I've known for a very long time, and he embodies what it means to look towards the future, but to put work in today. He's prepared himself to do great things. Even when I met him at Brown University back in the day, and he is none other than my brother, my friend, Eldridge Gilbert. Now, Eldridge Gilbert graduated from Brown University, Bruno, in 2005 with a bachelor's degree in Africana Studies and Psychology. Following Brown, El joined Teach for America and worked in Houston for 11 years. During that time, he earned his MBA from the Jones School of Business at Rice University. And while in Houston, El worked for Yes Prep Public Schools and was a founding school director principal of Yes Prep North Forest, a 6th to 12th grade campus of 850 students for 6 years. After leaving Houston, El worked as the managing director of schools at KIPP Bay Area Public Schools. And for 2 years, he coached, developed, and managed 8 principals. Eldridge currently lives in Brooklyn, New York, and serves as the Chief Schools Officer for Coney Island Prep Schools while coaching principals for the KIPP Foundation. He is currently the president of the Inman Black Alumni Council. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, pets included, please welcome to the stage my friend, my longtime friend, and my brother, Eldridge Gilbert. El, what is going on?
Not too much, Sean. How you doing?
Man, I'm good, El. I'm good because I'm back with you. You know, you and I have a long time history. You know, we ran track together. You know, my senior year and your freshman year. It's just actually my senior year and your my sophomore year, my junior year and your freshman year. Sorry, and you know, looking at the progression from you from then to now. It's incredible. You know, I got to say, just before we even get started, I always saw and have always seen you as someone who's been a leader since the day you walked on campus. You walked on campus like gangbusters. You walked on campus like, this is mine. And I embrace that. And I remember seeing you do so many things in terms of inspiring other people to whatever you did, people were doing it. Like if you would have put your hand in the air, 10 people put half their hands in the air, you know, just because it was you. And you just had this infectious charisma about you that you could inspire and engage people and encourage them to do anything, whether it meant going for runs, you know, on the track, or whether it meant doing advocacy work on the campus. You were that guy who just had people around him all the time doing things that were productive and successful and community-based. And, you know, it's no surprise to me looking at your bio and your journey from where you were to where you are now, what you've done to influence so much change in the school system and in the community. I'm just really impressed by you. So just welcome on the show, brethren. It's been a great experience watching your growth, and I'm happy that you're here.
I'm really happy to be here. And I was copying you for a good 2 of those years at Brown. So that's due to big brother influence. Captain Sean Thomas, you had a huge influence on me. So thanks for saying that. But I was copying copying you.
I don't believe you at all, but I appreciate the sentiments. So, El, you and I ran track together. You were sprinter, I was jumper. We had many times on the track sharing experiences and mutual friends, and both being Black men at Brown. So that experience by itself is a thing, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I just want to know how you're doing. I know you're in Brooklyn now with me, and I saw you on the street when I was driving. You were walking, so that's the only reason I actually knew you were in Brooklyn. But how are you doing? How's life? How's COVID-19 and the whole quarantine madness, Zoom madness, been treating you? As an educator at this time?
Yeah, doing well. It's been a crazy, like, I can't believe it's been a year of all this, right? Before that, Brooklyn has been good to me. I'm enjoying being back on the East Coast. I've had like a little bit of a journey to get back to the East Coast, but it's been dope other than the cold. But New York has been a really welcoming place, like professionally and personally. It's been great to like reconnect, like to just randomly see you walking down the street was like the joy of, I think it was a Sunday. I was like leaving church. It's like, oh, that shot, like that kind of experience I get to have here has definitely made it sweet to be back on the East Coast. But with COVID stuff, man, it's been stressful as an educator. I manage principals, so it's been hard to figure out what's the right mix of being supportive of both students and staff and families, and then trying to do school and make sure that it's not like a waste of time for kids and families, and kind of grappling with this idea of kids like losing time, being left behind. Like there's so many pieces of our work in education that has been challenged by COVID, including like just some of our long held beliefs about what school is supposed to do and what it means to be successful in school. So I'm excited for what's going to be on the other side of this, but it's been pretty stressful. I will say though that like I've been blessed in that my role has allowed me to go to campus. So our schools are completely virtual just for the safety of kids and families. But I've gone on campus to like distribute food to families because as a public school, we have to do that. And just like work the front, we gave out laptops and like MiFis and things to families. And so having the opportunity to engage with people in that way has been a lifesaver for me. And so I've been really grateful to have a reason to get out the house and a reason to engage with grateful people and to give back in such a crazy time. So COVID is the worst, but it has had some bright spots that have made it a little bit more bearable for me as a person.
That's great. That's fantastic. I know a lot of people have been relegated to their homes, but I'm glad that you're actually still being able to go out there and engage with people and staff members. And, I knew you were Africana Studies major at school. And actually, looking back, I've said this on a number of other shows, I wish I had studied Africana Studies. I wish I had majored in that. At this point in my life right now, as I'm about to be 40 soon, I look back and I say, I really wish. I love psychology. I love the medical stuff as well. But to be able to know more about our history and to study it, as opposed to it being thrown at you, whenever it can be thrown at you in school, it's just different. And I wish I had really taken advantage of studying that while at Brown. But you did study that. That was your major. You minored in psychology. What from that study motivated you to go towards the Teach for America route?
Yeah, I think it was the obligation piece. So you can't study Africana Studies and my family is like educators as well, and not kind of feel drawn to ways to give back to the community and to the legacy of people who made it possible for you to be in that space. So I wouldn't have been at Brown if it weren't for Black educators and like both in my family and folks that I don't know and have no knowledge of, right? And then I learned so much about myself through Africana Studies. So, I knew I was Black, but then there were like layers that I was like uncovering about myself through like this academic process I was going through. And then there was so much to the Black diaspora, to the African diaspora that I was really limited in knowledge of. I think when I got to undergrad, it was like the first time that I really explored like Afro-Caribbean culture and people and like the ways in which we are as an African American similar and like dissimilar and really broaden my horizons in terms of what it meant to be a Black person in this world. And so I wanted to give that back. that joy and that curiosity, that knowledge, and that like push that you need to be a better person. And so that's why I did Teach for America. When I was, their tagline at the time was like, education is the civil rights movement of our generation or something like that. And that grabbed me. And so as cheesy as it sounds now, and I'm glad that I did education, I'm glad I did Teach for America. And then my good friend Chaz was like in it, he was doing Teach for America. He knew that was his thing. He kind of pulled me and my other like really good friend Dwight in along the way. I was like the third one. I followed them into it. But it was all rooted in this idea for me of like giving back to people who look like me. And so that's how I ended up doing Teach for America, and Africana Studies was a huge part of that. Just knowing that people had poured into me the past 4 years and for many years before that. And so it was my opportunity to kind of pour back into young people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shout out to Chaz and Dwight, class of 05 members as well. I know that you have done the Africana Studies route and Teach for America, but you also have mentioned in your bio that you earned your MBA in the process. Now, a lot of people, stick to one thing and they stay on that one. But again, this just speaks to what I said earlier about you being someone who is a go-getter, trendsetter. While doing Teach for America, you earned your MBA. What sparked that? And how difficult or challenging was it for you to do both those things at the same time?
Oh, my MBA was terrible. It was so hard. It was like a bunch of things coming together at once. So Rice was with this entity in Houston, like the Houston Endowment was collaborating for this new project where they wanted educators and future ed leaders to get the skills that are given to you through an MBA. And so how do we prepare like this next generation of school leaders to think, not to run schools like a business, but to have like that kind of mindset that business leaders have. And in Houston, like that's not a big surprise that you would be like, oh, so these oil execs do this really well. What does that have to offer the education community? So I was in the first cohort of the REAP program, which is the Rice Educational Entrepreneurship Program. So like 7 of us who did the MBA while we were still working. So I was doing that, and that was my first year as a dean of students. So I was like a VP, essentially a vice principal, and in that program. And then I became a principal right after I graduated. So it was crazy hard. And the MBA, all the parts of the MBA, like macroeconomics and microeconomics and accounting, I was like, this is not I'm a paper writer. I can write papers, like give me something like that. So that's where I thrived. But the other parts of it were just really challenging. And it was a very different way to work and to look at the world and look at the way that people engage in the world. But I'm really grateful for it. I don't think I left with a lot of lessons around leadership, a lot of lessons around strategy and kind of building up a team and like some critical thinking skills that I don't think I would have gotten had I done a traditional education, a master's in education. So it was dope, but it was really hard. I would not go back, that's for sure.
I mean, the fact that you...
I'm sorry, Sean.
The fact that you even went through that at all, I'm always impressed by it. And I don't know how many people would pursue doing those kind of things while still teaching, because they're two different things, right? You're talking about what you're doing in the classroom, and then like a whole different subset, like a whole different mindset. How have you found ways to combine the two passions for you now, the business and the teaching end?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. At the time, it didn't make a lot of sense. I think the parts that we were going through that were work applicable they didn't have like a place for me and my job. There were like some sprinklings around, like I said, like leadership, leading a team of people, but definitely not. It didn't feel applicable to my day to day. It felt much more helpful afterwards, and when I became a principal, and like doing root cause analysis and trying to figure out like what's at the heart of an issue, or what are the goals and like the ways to track towards a goal and motivate people to get on board, and how can you kind of progress monitor and then change shift. And those were all really applicable to my life as a principal. And so that was really helpful. But when I first got out, it didn't seem helpful. Now I still lean on it. So I do some like principal and like leadership consulting alongside my regular job, which is more like problem solving for a school district and being a part of, how do we do COVID, right? So that feels different than like the consulting work that I do. But in terms of like the overlay of business, there's a lot of similarities. So there's a lot of critical thinking and question asking and probing that I do in the consulting work that when I apply it to my job, I think I get better results out of the principles that I like manage and evaluate. There's a lot of strategy related to how we do COVID. And so we can talk about all the problems, but trying to narrow down to like, well, what's the one thing that's in our locus of control that we can work on? And then how do we create a path to success and redefine that? Those are ways of thinking that I definitely got from the MBA, and the way that business leaders think through stuff. And that's not usually how educators are encouraged to think, right? Kids are the bottom line. It's all heart. It's all, this is a noble profession. Yeah, but it's also, we are doing like some business work. We are critical thinkers. We are problem solvers. And the kid and the heart stuff lives alongside that. The social justice element of that lives alongside it. But we have to be thoughtful and intentional in a way that I don't think you're always taught to be. So now those two things live together and feel very meshed, but not during not during at all.
It's funny you mentioned that because, as a physical therapist, I know how to do stuff physically, right? When it comes to the health stuff, when people get hurt, that kind of stuff, I got it. But as a director, I'm thrown into this system now where, yes, I'm still treating, but what I'm doing now more is like you're talking about management, KPIs, looking at numbers, looking at, insurances and trying to figure out cost analysis and that kind of stuff. You don't learn that kind of stuff in school.
No.
So, I think you taking that route for the MBA was a brilliant one because now you're able to apply like everything else. School's a business, right? Physical therapy is a business. We talk about not being those things, but even churches, those are businesses in a sense. So money does have to come in and has to be managed and people have to be managed. So you having that experience and that background to apply what you learned from the MBA to the teaching realm gives you even more power, I think, and even more of a savvy to know what and how to manage people and how to manage things and funds appropriately to be even more successful. I think that most people should do MBAs, especially if you're in any kind of like financial based environment. And I wish I had, taken some more MBA classes. I remember taking an economics class that wasn't at Brown, it was in high school, and I was so bad at it. It's like so bad. But, recognizing that these things are going to be so important to you to use, especially depending on what role you're in, like yours and mine, in terms of dealing with people and dealing with money and finances and what have you, need to have that background to run things well. Yeah. And I think it was great that you saw the intuition you had to take the MBA during the Teach America stint was genius because it just makes you a better person in the end.
Yeah, thanks. That makes me feel really smart right now.
So, and then you got involved with the Yes Prep public schools, and I'm always curious what leads people to become principals. My mom is an AP and she does education work with other teachers, but being a principal is a very specific role. So what led you from Teach America, right, where you were like, oh, my friends do not hop in there, to being a principal in that same regard?
Yeah, that's that's a good question. Part of it is because I have a big mouth. My second year teaching, I was working for a slightly weird path. I was New Orleans Core 2005 was my Teach America placement. And so after a week of teaching, Hurricane Katrina hit, and that's how I ended up in Houston. And so because I was in Houston, they didn't have like a placement for us because there were like 80 of us. And so they gave us the option to like be a part of a charter school for New Orleans evacuees in Houston. And after that first year, I was like, this is terrible. I'm terrible, but I'm going to fulfill this commitment. And so I joined another charter network, and so the first one was actually KIPP, and then who I then 10 years later worked for again and work for now. But the second one that I joined was Yes Prep, who then I worked for 10 years when I was in Houston. And like an event, I think I was with our founder, I was saying, because and this is the big mouth part of me, like we had 4 schools at the time. Only one of them was in a predominantly Black area in Houston. And I was like, we have a really great system. We need to serve more Black kids. I want to be a principal. I want to be a school director of like one of our campuses in a Black neighborhood. And he was like, I'm sure that he didn't take me really seriously, but we were also small and I was young. So maybe he took me kind of seriously. And so then like over the course of the next couple of years, like I did well, like I was a good teacher. I was a good teacher. I enjoyed teaching. I like kids. I didn't realize any of that beforehand, but I was a pretty good teacher. I transitioned into the role of dean of students, which is like culture manager of the school. And so that's like the assistant principal role I was describing. And then from there was an opportunity to apply to be the principal of our next school, our 8th campus at the time. And I went through the process and I was selected to be that leader. And then, so we had there was one Black neighborhood in Houston that I was pretty sure we were going to open in. We ended up opening in a different Black neighborhood, which was ultimately like where I was supposed to be, because nothing happens by accident or coincidence. But yeah, it was mostly my big mouth getting me into trouble. And then I think being committed to a belief that what we had to offer was important to have Black families in Houston have the opportunity to take advantage of. I mean, Houston's huge, and and we were serving a lot of Latinx families, and that was really important. And I loved that we were doing that. I also felt like we had lots of Black families in Houston who then weren't getting that same opportunity. And so it was important that we create that open schools where that was going to be more of a possibility as well.
That's huge. And I'm a big supporter of nothing happens by accident. So for all those things that happened for you means that was probably exactly where you're supposed to be. And even looking at your experience with KIPP in the Bay Area, now I love California, but Houston and Cali are very different.
Yeah.
Right. So what was the experience you transitioning from the Houston experience to the Bay Area?
It was really different. The Bay, I love the Bay. I'm pretty sure I'll be back in the Bay at some point. I love living in the Bay. But yeah, from the weather, like I moved in July. It's like triple degrees in Houston in July. It was cold in the Bay. It was like 65, like some Indian summer thing. I was dying. I was like, this is freezing, but I loved it. And the diversity in the Bay is so different. It's so much smaller. I lived in Oakland. You have just like a huge smattering of so much difference all the time. Like it was great. But the challenges are also really different than Houston. By comparison, you would think that, Houston's a very new city. It's got it's got money, and Southern poverty is very different than like West Coast poverty, and the conditions of the majority of like Black and brown people in the Bay is just really different than what it looks like in Houston on a day-to-day basis. And so that was hard. The striking difference in homelessness was like jolting to me. You can't walk around in San Francisco and Oakland without in some ways, like you're walking over people who are homeless, and like that just wasn't the case in Houston. So there was like good and bad, and it was very sobering. I think I still, like I said, I would go back to the Bay. Like I love it there. I was born there. I feel a lot of pull to be in that space. It was very sobering leaving Houston, where it felt like people for the most part are doing well. Like I knew my school, but it wasn't like when you're in downtown or when you're out and about, you see rampant people just like not doing well or not having their needs not met. And that is much more on at the forefront of my Bay Area experience. You have the experience of like Black people in particular being pushed out of the Bay Area because they can't afford to live there. And then you've got, gentrification of neighborhoods in San Francisco and Oakland by like younger white people who can come in and just like, you're working in tech or you're working, Google and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And you can afford to like raise the rent. It was very, very different. But 2 valuable experiences for sure. And I haven't had enough of the Bay yet, so.
Yeah, no, I forgot you're from Cali. I just completely forgot that. But yeah, I love the Bay too, and even going from the Bay Area back to New York is a transition because again, New York has its own set of great things in terms of diversity and also like crazy things in terms of diversity. Especially living in Brooklyn, which is the melting pot of all kinds of things. Yeah. And now you being the chief officer of Coney Island Schools, what does your coaching entail for other principals, and how do you prepare them for the challenges that you face in New York?
Yeah, New York is really different than the Bay. A lot of similarities, but different. I think my support of principals and the principals here is more about navigating the diversity. There's a lot of stuff that's different. One of them is navigating the diversity and DEI space. So in New York, in Brooklyn, in Coney Island, like where our schools are, you've got a lot of difference living on top of each other, but they're kind of, I feel like our families can live in like these separate tracks and like not really interact with each other across lots of the differences. So like I'm comfortable with people who don't look like me, who don't speak the same language as me, but I'm not necessarily like sharing a life experience with them. And so then when you get into schools, that's like where those things kind of hit. And so especially in the wake of, the last summer and the pandemic, issues of equity come up differently now. And so I feel like I spent a lot of time, good time, like time that I love navigating those challenges of being in a diverse environment and trying to meet people both where they are and create community and then move us collectively towards something better. New York as a state has interesting rules with special education. And so it's very different. The system operates very differently than California and then in Texas. And so there's a lot of navigating that. And I think one of the big pieces is like discipline and care. So on the West Coast, I think there's a tendency to like lean really far away from like management and control of like kids and bodies, right? So you can do what you want. Like right? Like this is the same way that you feel like the East Coast is like kind of like, oh, or the West Coast is like, kind of hippie, and that leans even into like how charter schools are made up and like the rules and ways in which we expect kids to behave. It's actually really different on the East Coast, and so there's a lot more control of bodies, more rigid expectations. So my schools my principals were like navigating that and changing some of those things because it's not the way that we should be treating kids and things of that nature. And that's not the only route to get results, but we're having to navigate those differences, especially when I first got here. It's different now. We're much more aligned now. But some of those things, like removing some like harsh consequences for things that like we wouldn't give harsh consequences for in the Bay Area or in Texas, like trying to figure that out on the East Coast has been a challenge. And just raising the bar of instruction, which is it's just different because New York is so different than what people expect in the Bay, and again different than in Houston as well. But yeah, lots of question asking because I didn't go to school in New York, and I wasn't a principal here, so I have to ask questions and probe, and then engage and invest my principles in something different because. Yeah, like people don't respond well to being necessarily told what to do, and so I try not to do that as much as possible. So people want to go in the direction that I think is best for us to go in together.
What's the general demographic of the, I guess first the students and then the teachers that you're engaging with?
Yeah, so we have 4 schools. Our elementary school is crazy diverse. Like I've never been in a more diverse school. We're in Coney Island. Well, we're a little outside of Coney Island, I think between Bensonhurst and another neighborhood. I think it's not Bath Beach, but I can't think of the name of it. But it's super diverse. We've got like a lot of like East Asian immigrant children, lots of Black and brown, like Latinx kids. And then we've got like Russian immigrant students. So it's one of the reasons why I took the job is it was the most diverse school I've ever been in. And so we see that kind of diversity of students follow itself into our middle school setting, where it's still diverse. It's not as diverse as our elementary schools. Some of the East Asian families that we work with seem to not follow us to the middle school. And then our high school, this is the first year that our high school will be predominantly Latinx. In the past, has been predominantly Black. And so a lot of, again, like when we first started, there were a handful of like those East Asian families who chose to be with us, like a really small number of like the white immigrant families or European immigrant families who chose to be with us at the high school. So the pipeline is super diverse in elementary school and then gets somewhat less diverse, but we'll see how that changes over time. Our teaching staff, though, is a different story. Our teaching staff is now we're like 50 across all 4 schools. We're like 50% folks of color and 50% white. But that has not always been the story, and that's not the same at all of our campuses. So our high school is still a predominantly white teaching staff. The middle school is a predominantly Black teaching staff, and then it's like it gets a little diverse in the 2 elementary schools. But our teaching staff across the board doesn't necessarily look like the students that we serve.
Yeah, I'm just curious because my daughter is in kindergarten now, and I also didn't go to school in the city. I went to school mostly outside of the city, and then high school in Connecticut and Brown with you clearly. But just looking at the different schools that are in New York, every school is different. Depending on what location you're in, every school, every district is different. Even looking at the teaching staff for these schools, it can vary. We were looking at some of the kindergarten schools for her. There were some schools that had a very diverse teaching population, but all of their students were not. Or you would go to some schools where the kids were just so diverse up to a certain age. Like you said, like either K through 5 was super diverse, and after that it was very, very of the same race. So it's interesting how these things shift based on location, based on the schools. And I'm always curious now, as you're an educator, and again, Africana Studies was your major, and you've been through all these different things, Teach for America, and at this place now where you're teaching principals and teachers how to teach. When it comes to history, when it comes to what's being taught in these books, how are you able to share information that's not always in the books, right? When it comes to our history of people of color, the stories that are not always told in our classrooms, what have you done to help excite or promote the proper education about our history that should be shared with our students and your staff?
Yeah, that's a good and a difficult question. I don't think I do enough. So I work really closely with our chief academic officer, and he has taken on creating or identifying a new history curriculum for us to use as a network, because the history curriculums that we've had in the past haven't done, I think, as good of a job as we would like, haven't met our standards for sharing a diverse set of historical perspectives and experiences like with our kids. And so he's been working really hard on that. I've been really supportive. That's something like when we go into classrooms, we ask, and do observations, like we're asking kids about what we're looking for in our observations, talking to the teachers about the vice principals who coach them, like, hey, how are you infusing like a diverse perspective and teaching kids that like, this is one perspective of this story, but like, how are we widening their scope to say like, well, what are the other points of views? And I think we're trying to get to the point where we decenter like a white narrative with respect to historical events. And so this didn't just happen from the gaze of white people. Let's talk about it only from perspectives of like a person of color or a woman, and see what lessons our kids gain from that and how they connect with it different. So it's an ongoing conversation. I would say like some tangible things that I do. I'm on like the 1619 like listserv, and so whenever they have professional development opportunities and things of that nature, I share it back with our vice principals who manage like history, so that they're able to go out and see, are there other resources that they can be, visit with, explore, and then take into like their classrooms. I worked with Professor Bogues at Brown on did like really minor consulting on like the history textbook that they did. This is so awkward because like I actually have this next to me, but like, so they did one from the Center of Slavery and Justice. And so like using this as a resource in our schools, like that felt like I was in a TV show. I was like, so by the way, and it's just, this is like just at my desk, but what are all the resources that exist, and how do we just infuse them? First introduce them to like our teachers so that they have a bevy of places to choose from, and then help them in their selection, like use the ones that are really well done, well researched, and then figure out how to best present them to kids, right? Because it's not just about I think it's really important, and maybe I think it's probably disproportionately important to represent like the Black and brown experience, but those are not the only experiences that our kids need to be exposed to in schools. And so how do we make sure that every kid has an opportunity to kind of see themselves reflected in the history curriculum that we give it? It's really hard, but I'm really glad to have a great partner in our chief academic officer, and from our CEO. Like this is work that we want to prioritize, and it's things that I tried to do when I was in the class. When I was a teacher, like try to teach Malcolm X. So I did. I created my own, like led my own civil rights unit with my kids, where we watched Eyes on the Prize. So there are all these like small in routes that I've tried, and I think at this point in my career, it's not about me doing it; it's about empowering other people to do it for themselves, because that'll live on longer than if I'm like, well, here's like the set of lesson plans that you have to use. That doesn't change people's minds. It's got to be their experience and feel like it comes from them. So we're doing a lot of work to try to make that possible.
That's powerful. You definitely are doing so much, and kudos to you and your team for continuing to press forward and to push the boundaries, especially in New York with all these different schools you're working with. And I know that you, outside of the school network, you do a lot of other things, which is no surprise again, since you were so active when you were at Brown. You're currently the president of the Inman Page Black Alumni Council. Just tell listeners what that council is and what your primary role is with the council.
Yeah, so Inman Page Black Alumni Council, IPC, we exist. We were founded like 20 years ago. I feel like I got to give like a little bit of the history to really create a set of experiences to protect and enhance. That's Friends of Brown Track and Field. I guess those words are still applicable, but to enrich the experiences of Black alumni from Brown, current students, and then faculty and staff, like the on the campus community. So our goal is really to provide whatever support, programming, whatever it might be, that's going to make the lives of like the Black alum better and help connect them back to Brown in ways that help to enrich their lives, but also make the university a better place. Year after year, decade after decade, and ensuring that IPC alum are like a part of the university. And so we have, we've got lots of folks who volunteer every year to help do that. My main role as president is to craft a vision and a strategy for how we can do that for the 2 years that I'm in the leader seat. And one of the biggest things I think is on my plate is like, how do we get young alum involved and like make sure that they feel tapped into IPC and feel like they're part of a community of Black alumni from Brown, and that they want to give back to the university, not just monetarily, but like through volunteering or mentoring, whatever it might be. And so I feel like that's my job, is to make sure that there's a space for every Black alum in IPC and the work that we do. And that helps to foster a connection back with our alma mater. So that's the best I can do on the fly.
No, it's great. It's great. It's come such a long way. I've seen the entire progression of it since I was there to now, and you guys doing a fantastic job. I also know you were featured on the cover of Brown Alumni magazine last year, and I have my own copy at home. I'm curious, and I want you just to share with the listeners, what sparked you being on the cover, and what story did you share in the magazine about your experience at Brown?
I do not know how I got chosen to be on the cover. I think it's because I'm president of IPC, but I don't know. They just emailed me. They're like, will you do this article? And I was like, sure. And then they said something about being on the cover, and I was like, uh-huh. And then they followed up a couple months later and like, there's going to be a photographer. I was very confused by it all, because I thought it was just fun times, jokes. But it was not. The story was really around my perspective as an educator around COVID. And like the racial justice movement. So the interview happened, I want to say like right after things kind of blew up with George Floyd. And I say that because, there are so many deaths of like Black men and women at the hands of police, like unjustly recorded, all that stuff for like the last several years. And I think COVID really made the space, sadly, but like made the space with people not working to pay attention to what was happening with respect to racial justice. in such a way that the Brown Alumni magazine wanted to do like a story on it. So I was asked for my perspective about like, what should we be doing in schools? What are the conversations that, a Black educator is thinking about or having in light of what's happening with racial justice movement in the U.S. And so, yeah, that was my story. I just kind of talked about, being mad and not being in a space to wait on my white friends, peers, colleagues, whatever, to wake up to like these issues. Because as I just said, like George Floyd wasn't the first and wasn't and Breonna Taylor, like none of that is new. Those are wrongs to our community that we are aware of summer after summer, decade, that it's not new. And so some of what I shared in the article, and I think they only did, a small bit of it. I'm one of 6 people I think that they featured in it. But, we don't have time to like wait for you to have like this racial awakening that there's like injustice done to Black and brown bodies. Like this is happening now. And from an educator standpoint, like we need to be talking about it in schools. We need to be doing the work with like teachers, because you can do a lot of harm to people, not just by, you don't have to kill a Black man or a Black woman in order to do harm to the community. And there are ways in which educators do deep damage to Black and brown kids every single day with what they say or don't say. And, so there's so much of that when we don't have time to waste. And we stand on the shoulders of many Black and brown men and women who've been like sounding this alarm for centuries. And so we can't, their urgency of it all is kind of what I think they asked me to share. And they included some in there.
Yeah, well, I read the article. It was great. I was proud to see you on the cover. I was proud to read the article. And I think it shows, the capacity for Brown, as always, to be a pillar for other schools to follow in terms of highlighting what's happening around the country and around the world, and even on its campuses. Even speaking of campus issues, you've been really pivotal in not just showing and sharing your story and your experience trying to link former alumni or current alumni and current students at Brown, but also the track and field program, especially for the men's program that was, and I've shared this on the show before, that was cut for a moment and then reinstated. You were very pivotal, though, Eldridge, in formulating Zoom meetings for the team and corralling alumni together to build awareness of what was happening and to raise funds for the program. And in the span of what seemed like months, but it was really just weeks of a turnaround, where the school just kind of came around and really saw the progression and the family and the support that was around this team that was trying to separate the men's team from the women's team at school. As there have been cuts of Brown track and field across the country for various programs, Brown was able to reinstate this program, and a lot of that was, thanks to your support and your push for the team. So, what was your experience, engaging with the team and with the alumni? I had Coach Hunt on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about it a little bit. But I'm curious about your experience, as someone who did run, and as an alumni looking back now at what has been happening, and still being in touch with the current students. What was your experience with that entire fiasco, and how has that changed in terms of how the team is doing right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting because that all happened the same week, right? Like the team got cut the same week that George Floyd protests happened. And I remember I joined a call that, there are some really amazing young alum, Bryn Smith, Jordan Mann, like there were people who were like, real up in arms about it. And I joined a call and I was like, oh, they got it. Like they got a whole plan. Like, let me sign my name on some signature thing. But really I got involved because for Black men from the team, juniors reached out to the BCSC and were like, we need IPC, we want IPC support. We want Black alumni to do something. And so because I was pregnant, they're like, so what are you going to do? Like, okay, so I guess I have to help in some kind of way. And it was, the track and field team was so important to me. pivotal. Coach, you're always going to be Captain Sean to me. Like, I just can't, like, my big brother and my captain, like, that's what a huge part of my Brown experience. So I felt an obligation to kind of give back to the team because I got a lot from the team when I was there. And so it was really a powerful experience of reaching out to like the Black alum from the team, because there's so many of us and so many of us doing such dope things. And so it was nice to have a reason to reach out to Antonio Kittles and like, oh, and Trinity and people beyond that, Joseph Bruno, like there are just so many great Black men and women from the team. And so providing another avenue to be involved in the advocacy for the team. So sending a letter to the president from Black alumni that just, that included not just people who ran on the team, but folks from Inman Page who are just outraged that there wouldn't be a men's track and field team, and how if there hadn't been a men's track and field team, what their Black experience at Brown would have been like was amazing. Like there was such an outpouring of support. And so it felt like this huge surge of like love and reconnections, not only Brown, but like Black people who are a part of Brown and a part of, those shoulders again that we stand on. So for me, it's felt like amazing. I didn't have like an amazing track career. Like it was fine. Like I did all right, but I would have liked to have done better. But this has kind of been a second go round of that, almost, to give back to the team in a more meaningful way as an adult. And to get like a lot of love back. So we now have like these monthly Zoom calls with Black men from the team. There's like 10 or 15 men who show up kind of every time, and just building community with their current guys on the team who show up to the calls. And, it's building community in a different sense. And the Black women have something similar. And so it's just felt like a lot of love. I think that's the best word I have for it. Is it's a new experience for me. I haven't, been a part of like an athlete community since undergrad. And so to like have this now, and to get to do some helping of like men on the team as they kind of navigate like grad school and, staying at Brown and talking to the coaches having an event. We did a event called, Around the Stand, which Tom Ratcliffe had created a documentary around the 1968 Olympics. And so we had that event and had one of the guys who I've been working with from from our group moderate the event, a current student. And it was it's just so nice to be able to feel like a part of that community, and ensure it's growth. And it's definitely not me by myself. Like there's a whole host of people who make a huge difference in that work every day. But it's fun. It's fun. It's fun to talk to undergrads, and it's hilarious to talk to older alum about their experience both at Brown and get in the mix with the undergrads. It's great. It's dope.
Yeah. I too was outraged when I heard the news, and I was excited to reconnect with so many people. And like you said, it just brings back so many memories of connections and the people who were on the team with you, and then recognizing that it's bigger than just the 4 years you were there. Whether you were on the team for a year or 4 years, the people who came before you and after you, that legacy is just so strong, especially for people of color. That legacy is stronger, and it's like it's the fabric of who we are. So, I was just really excited to see the progress and people coming together for a common good. And to see that the right decision was made and that things are moving forward still. So again, kudos to you and all the team, and anyone who's listening who was a supporter of that, either financially or just in terms of your voice. It was truly appreciated. Last question before the break, Al. I know that, given that all the work that you do is all connected to teaching and into community, I'm just curious what your thoughts are, as an administrator in New York. We have a new administration that's here now, and we're pushing forward. I mean, they just got started, but, things are happening. And, a lot of people are talking that now that the administration is here, no one's marching anymore. No one's doing this. No one's doing that. What are your thoughts on, the whole Black Lives Matter movement? And do you think that this new administration is going to calm those things down? Do you think that we're still going to see people continuing to do their demonstrations and whatnot in the communities, especially in New York, because New York is New York, so there's a march on every block depending on the day.
Right.
A lot of people, have said that since the administration started, that people are dying down, that people are getting comfortable, and that we should still be holding this administration accountable to whatever they promised they were going to do. What are your thoughts on these comments that people are making nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that we continue to hold like this new administration accountable to promises and to do better. I'm pleasantly surprised with, it's been like a month, if that, with the things that Biden is saying he wants to do. And I was reading an article yesterday about like Black farmers and like the work the administration is trying to do with that. I'm like, oh, like that wasn't on my docket. When I thought about like marching and all that kind of stuff, when I'm outraged, I haven't thought about Black farmers. And so I think there's so many places for the work to be done, and I'm hopeful and like I've been pleased so far personally with what I've seen and heard come out of the administration with respect to racism and white supremacy. Like Biden speaking about those things in his inauguration speech, I was like, okay, like, all right, Joe, like, let's go then. Like, if you're gonna, that's great. And I hope it's not just lip service. And it doesn't seem like that, but change takes time. It's not as if he or Kamala Harris can just like, with a stroke of a pen necessarily like change all these things. And so we got to see more than just talk. I think we need to see more than just what's happening right now, and accountability is important. And so I hope we don't lean back and say, well, him getting elected in the first, woman and Black and South Asian woman to be, to be vice president is enough. It's certainly not enough. But I think we'll see I think there'll be marching stuff this summer. Like it's not over yet, right? And that's a good thing. But hopefully, the backlash and response to it won't be as violent as it was this summer. And for better or worse, the insurrection on January 6th has continued to create lots of comparisons between Black Lives Matter and the largely white crowd of people breaking into the Capitol. So I hope we'll see a really different way in which we handle folks who are fighting for racial justice versus fighting for the maintenance of white supremacy, and we'll be able to name it as such in this country. I think it's, I think we've had good signs that that's a possibility. But if it doesn't happen, we got to get back out there and be as fervent about it as we were this summer. And I think there are many people out there who will continue to do that in New York and beyond. Yeah.
Folks, if you're just joining us, episode 50 of the Be More Today show, we're episode 50. I'm here with Eldridge Gilbert, class of 05. Currently raised in Brooklyn. He is the chief schools officer for Coney Island Schools, Prep Schools, and the president of the Inman Page Black Alumni Council. My friend, my track and field buddy. El, I got some quick fire questions for you. You've been someone who has already gone out there and changed the world in your own regard. But if there's one thing that you could pick to make the world a better place, what's that one thing that you would choose to make this world a better place?
Ooh, that's a big one. I think it is. Ooh. I think I would lean into this idea of eradicating racism and the racial caste system across the world, right? Color is white supremacy. Maybe that's probably a better catch-all term for it, right? Because so many of the ills that I think we see across the world, and the ones that definitely impact the lives of people that I'm most intimately connected to, are rooted in the maintenance of white supremacy and white supremacist ideals and culture that just permeate how we operate on the day-to-day. And I think if that wasn't the case, if we could get rid of that, so to speak, if we could change that, I wonder of the many ripples that would have on how people interact with each other. Can capitalism survive in the same kind of way if we don't have a white supremacist culture that helps to promote capitalism looking a certain kind of way? Like, can you even have that? And at the same time, like, I don't know. I don't know that you can. I don't know that sexism plays itself out in the same kind of way if you don't have, race put on top of that, again, like to maintain white supremacy especially for white men, right? So, and white women who play like their own role in that. So I think that would be the thing that I would eliminate. And hopefully we get a lot of good out of that. But I know on an intimate level, it would change many lives, for the better if that wasn't the operating system across the world.
Yeah, again, it's funny because you keep saying you don't know. We've never seen a society that doesn't have those two things together. So it's like, is it even possible? Yeah, but yeah, I think that would be a game changer for sure. Now, El, I Be More Today is my mantra, it's my thing. You've seen it probably everywhere now on various platforms. I wrote this book, Be More Today, 40 Guides to a Better Version of You. And in the book, I just talk about starting things, stopping things, and having goals for your life. And I always ask everybody on the show what Be More Today means to them, because it's always different. So you, my friend, are the 50th person that I've asked this phrase to, 50 for a reason. So Eldridge Gilbert, when you hear the phrase Be More Today, what does that phrase mean to you?
I think, to me, it speaks to like the idea of perseverance and resilience and goals, right? Like it's about striving. And so whenever I see what you're doing, and I see it all the time, whether it's like the racing or like the work that you're doing through your church, and just like watching these podcasts, the thing that I always leave with like is a sense of like, okay, Elle, what are you trying to do? How can you strive to be better and be more like today? And like in the long term, like it never lands to me as like a singular moment in time. It's about like the long haul, which is why I think perseverance and resilience come up for me, because no matter the challenges that you face, and there are always challenges, how can you be better in spite of them, because of them? And that's a daily process, and it's both like right now and for the long term. So how can I be a better person today in this moment with like what just happened? And then how do I carry that forth and make that a part of my life on a day-to-day basis? That's what Be More Today means to me. It's about like that constant striving to be the best version of yourself and maximize your own potential, and then discover more of it as the days progress.
Mm-hmm. Well said, sir. Well said. Now we're striving into 2021 right now, and everyone's trying to start something new this year. Have already started something. What's one thing that you wanted to start or have already started to do that was new for 2021?
So I read this book, All About Love by Bell Hooks. And so I think the thing that I've been trying to do is kind of redefine love. And so she has like she uses like knowledge and care and affection and recognition and respect and trust and commitment, like all those things to describe love, and very much takes it outside of like the romantic context. And so I'm trying to apply her definition of love to like my relationships with like all people. And I don't mean that in like a crazy way. It's not like I've, millions of people that I'm out here trying to like love on, but the people that I do claim to love and that I feel love towards, like how can I use her definition to push myself to like expand that love and like the way that I think about that love with those people. So that's my new thing for 2021. It's been a challenge, but 2021, I got the whole year to get better at it. But I think that's the new thing, that and like increasing my faith in reading more.
No, I definitely hear that. I'm trying to read myself more, and I told myself that I'd read at least 4 books, like 1 book per quarter last year. And actually, I ended up reading 7, which is I'd never happens for me. So, but continuing that, like you said, that perseverance, that striving, continuing to do that this year is going to be the challenge. And I have to just find ways to do that. And yeah, I agree. Love is that thing that if we get rid of racism and have more love in this world, it would be a much better place in general. So I think you're on the right track with that as well. Any final tips you want to share with aspiring teachers, aspiring principals, anyone who is in line to either get their MBA or has their MBA, or any aspiring people who are interested in being more involved in page council or anything that's community related?
Yeah. I would say to the educators out there, whether it's like the teacher role or the principal role, my advice would be to like take care of, like figure out your balance between like taking care of yourself and being there for the constituency, the community that you serve. And to recognize that it takes a lot of mental fortitude and brilliance to be an excellent educator. You know, we get a lot of like pats on the back for like being noble, like, oh, you teach, and that's a great thing, but it's also an incredibly challenging like task that very intelligent people do extremely well. And it's not just a nice thing to do. It is the work of our future. And so carry that with you as you go through your challenges alongside finding that balance. I think that's super important and not something that I had grasped early on. And for people who want to be a principal, I would just say like, take your time. Unfortunately, educational inequities are not going anywhere. And so I feel like I became a principal really quickly, and when I was probably like not as mature as I could have been. And that if I would have had someone tell me to slow down and take my time, I would have been, I think, a more successful principal. For folks who want to be involved in IPC, come on in. Like, there's room for you. We got something for you. All you got to do is find us. You can email me. You know, check out the Facebook page. Like, there's space for you. There is a way for you to contribute to Black community, both at Brown and the alumni community. And so any way you want to do that, just reach out and we will find a space for you to a venue for you to do that. And if you want to mentor a student, we got undergrads in Harambe House and just like around the way on campus who would love to be connected to an alum. Yeah, and I just, you know, I think the community service piece is just about, I think, finding your passion and then finding the time to give back to, you know, to the things that have given to you. And so there's something for all of us to do, right? There's always a way for us to contribute outside of our day-to-day. And, you know, finding the passion and the time is the way to do that sustainably. So that's not a really good tip, but that's something I think about.
That's a great tip. Where can folks find you, follow you on social media or otherwise?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm not very active on Instagram, or I'm not cool on Instagram, but like Eldridge Gilbert 3. And then I'm on Facebook as well. And yeah, those are two main ways. I'm not savvy enough to keep up with Twitter and all that kind of stuff anymore. So really Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Eldridge Gilbert, thank you so much for being on the show. Episode 50 is in the books, and it's all thanks to you. So continue your great work, and thank you so much for being here with us for this 50th episode.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. I'm honored and appreciate being chosen for this episode.
And folks, do not forget the quotation from today by Malcolm X: "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today." As you heard from Al, his story is very inspiring, you know, to do so much at such a young age, literally. Principals usually in their older ages. He's done so much in such a short period of time and giving back in the same regard. He's making the future better for those who are coming after him. And it belongs to those who prepare for it today. Today is the day to get out there and make sure that you're handling your business. If it's something that you do want to get done, school-wise, work-wise, professionally, get it done. No excuses. And let's continue to support each other and use our community to help us to get there. It's really about coming together and each one reach one. He's shown that from Teacher America all the way to where he is right now. And I think his story is inspiring in the sense that it makes us really think that we can change the world one person at a time. So get out there and make sure that you do your same thing and you're part of the world, and be more today. Continue to watch us on all media platforms, beMoreToday.com for the book, the podcasts, workouts, everything's on there, folks. Just continue to support us as well. If you want to send us a message or send Ella a message through us, you can do that as well. Be More Today. That's BeMore2day@gmail.com or any of our social media platforms, as always. The Worship Life podcast continues to go on every single Wednesday, so check that out as well. My boy T. Farrell putting down some great words for encouraging you every single week. And for those of you who want to continue to follow us, we're going to be here on all platforms. So subscribe. Really appreciate it. All right. And as I always say, folks, have a good day. Have a good night. Have a great life. And continue. Take your steps to greatness to be the best version of you. Peace.